Okay, so next up it's time to look at the hotkey functionality in Traktor Pro. Now firstly, in order for hotkeys to sync perfectly every time, we do recommend that you beat grid your tracks. So if you don't know how to do this, please go and check out our tutorial on beat gridding on the Sonic Academy website. The next thing you'll want to do is make sure quantize and snap modes are enabled up here, just by clicking on them. In each deck on Traktor, we can set up to 8 individual hot cues or hot loops, which gives us a total of 32 possible hot cues and loops that we can use when we're in 4-deck mode. So why would you want to use hot cues in the first place? Well, when used creatively, this type of functionality effectively means that you can remix tracks live on the fly, and every time you trigger a hot cue, Traktor will drop it in on time and in sync. You can also use hot cues, or hot loops rather, to create whole new loops of your own. For example, you could have 4 decks playing with different loops in each deck, and when you combine these 4 different loops, it creates a whole new loop and a whole new unique sound. Setting up hot loops and hot cues in Traktor is thankfully very easy. First thing we do here is access the advanced panel, and we have our drop down here. We go into cue, and I'll quickly talk you through what you see on the screen here in front of you. The 2 arrows here, these allow us to skip through any saved cue points that we have in the track. It'll skip through them chronologically one by one from the start of the track to the end of the track. This drop down here, this allows us to name the cue point that we have set. You'll see mine is called auto grid. That's because when Traktor analyzes our music, it sets a beat grid marker on the very first cue point. So cue point 1 will generally be a beat grid marker. Now, why would you use this? Well, if you've set up a loop, for example, on a vocal, you might want to name that a vocal loop, or if you set it up in a break, you might want to name it break loop, and so on. So you can name it by clicking in here and subsequently using the drop down to name all your loops and cue points. This next drop down is for cue types. You have a number of different cue types in Traktor, which I'll explain in a few moments time, but you've got fade in and fade out cue points, you've got grid cue points, you have got loop cue points, and you have your general cue point as well. So this allows you to assign a different cue type, but we'll look at that in a moment. Your trash can, then, that allows you to delete any cue points or loop points that you've set. Bear in mind, if you are using tracks that are beat gridded and locked, you will need to go in and unlock the beat grid before you actually delete those cue points. Store, what it does, it stores the current cue point and maps it to the next available button. So if I was to hit store now, a cue point would be mapped to number 2. And then map, that basically allows you to change the assignment of your cue points. So for example, if I had a cue point set up on button number 5, but I wanted to change it to number 6, I just press the button 5, press map then, and press number 6 to change that on the cue point that I've set will change from position 5 to position 6. So down the bottom here is where our 8 hot cue buttons are located. These will be colored depending on the type of cue point we set. So for example, standard cues will be in blue, hot loops will be in green, while your beat grid marker, like we have saved here in position 1, that will be white. Fade in and fade out cue points will be brown, and load in cue points will be orange. So by default, as we said, the position 1 is white because it's a beat grid marker. So what I'm going to do now is show you how to set up some different hot cues and hot loops throughout a track and then trigger them. So the first thing we'll want to do is I want to set a load in marker, and I don't want to set it at the start of the track. I want to set it here after the first little break. Now what this means, when I set this cue point as a load in, I click number 2. Now that's set it up as a standard cue point, which you can see here, but I want to change it to a load in marker. So I drop that down and select it. Now the next time I load this track into Traktor will automatically jump to this load in point, so it knows to load the track from this very point. So the next thing we'll do, we'll set up a loop here. So I've selected a 4-beat loop. Now if you're not sure about looping, do check out our tutorial on looping on the Sonic Academy website. Now to convert that loop into a hot loop point, I just select 3. So that's going to be in position 3. Let's skip in a bit. set another hot loop here. Set a hot cue there. Set another hot loop here. Set another one here. Put that in slot 7. So now that I've set, I still have one space free there, but now that I've set my hot cues and hot loops, to trigger them, you just click on the one that you want. I can see Traktor jumps perfectly in time, perfectly in sync. There's another way of actually triggering these, which is by using the keys on your keyboard. Traktor automatically maps each of your hot cues to, on deck A, it will map buttons 1, 2, 3 and 4 on your keyboard. So if I click my keyboard, I'm pressing 2, 3, I'm pressing 4. Now if you want to use 5, 6, 7 and 8, you hold down Shift 1, 2, 3 and 4. And so on. So it's very easy to get loops up and running. We'll have a look now when we press play on this other deck. We'll get loops going on both sides. So these were some hot cues I'd set up earlier. So you can see how Traktor keeps that in sync. Now to access the hot cues and hot loops on deck B using the keyboard, use keys QWER or Shift QWER. And you can see how tightly Traktor keeps both those tracks synced. And of course, if you're using a MIDI controller like the Control X1, you have access to all these buttons on the controller. So that's effectively how you set up and use hot cues and hot loops in your tracks. You know, it's entirely up to yourself how creative you want to get with it. You know, the possibilities are pretty much endless. So in our next tutorial, we'll give you a look at looping and how that works in Traktor.